All right, we're going to go ahead and kick things off. Let's get started with today's webinar. Thanks everybody for joining me today. I appreciate it tremendously. Today's webcast is entitled Top 5 Reasons to Deploy Windows 10 with DirectAccess using the Celestics Edge E-Series appliance. Brief introduction before we get started. For those of you who are not familiar with me, my name is Richard Hicks, and I'm a Microsoft Most Valuable Professional, or MVP, in the Enterprise Security discipline. I have a variety of Microsoft certifications. Been in the business for quite some time, almost 20 years now, and almost exclusively focused during that time on deploying edge security and remote access solutions using Microsoft technologies and the Microsoft platform. So I'm uniquely position to speak to you about Windows 10 and DirectAccess today. I'll speak a little bit about Celestics Networks if you're not familiar with Celestics. Celestics has been around for quite some time now. Started out in 1999, originally always a dedicated security hardware company, but typically Celestics built OEM appliances for companies like Surf Control, WebSense, RSA, companies like that. Originally started out actually building checkpoint firewalls back in the day. So if you've been around that long, when checkpoint was actually just a software solution, Celestics was one of the first OEM hardware providers for the checkpoint platform. Celestics has a worldwide presence, headquartered in Northern California here in the U.S., but they do have offices around the world in Europe, the United Kingdom, Southeast Asia, and so forth. Many customers that we've deployed our solutions to across every conceivable vertical that you can imagine since 1999, and our products and services are available through a wide variety of distributors and resellers around the world. So we're here to talk a little bit about Windows 10. Of course, Microsoft released Windows 10 just at the end of last month, and there's been a lot of buzz about this new operating system. And of course, it's a great time to talk about Windows 10 and DirectAccess because Windows 10 really brings out the full feature set of DirectAccess as it is today in Windows Server 2012 R2. It features or enables the complete support for the full redundancy solution, provides better performance and scalability, enhanced monitoring. Windows 10 and DirectAccess is much more supportable, and in some cases it allows you to draw down on some of your infrastructure, supporting infrastructure requirements. By far, I think the most important and probably the single most compelling reason to deploy DirectAccess with Windows 10 clients is that they provide full support for geographic redundancy. So in DirectAccess, of course, you can configure DirectAccess in a multi-site deployment scenario. Fundamentally, what that means is that I can have a single DirectAccess deployment, and I can have multiple entry points in multiple physical locations to support geographic redundancy, high availability, and failover and disaster recovery and so forth. So in this example, I might have a DirectAccess deployment where I have an entry point in Los Angeles, another one in New York, and another one in London. Now, in that scenario, of course, there's support for all supported DirectAccess clients, Windows 7, Windows 8, and Windows 10. However, the majority of clients today that are Windows 7, of course, lack some of the features and capabilities to fully support this. So, for example, a Windows 7 DirectAccess client, although can be deployed in a multi-site scenario, is not aware of all sites. So it has to be assigned to a single site. And then the drawback there is that it can't transparently fail over to another site. So, for example, if I'm in Los Angeles and I connect to the Los Angeles entry point and it fails for some reason, let's say the ISP goes offline or somebody performs a switch upgrade or hardware upgrade, knocks my ISP link down, the Windows 7 client will be unable to fail over to another site. It will be completely unaware of any other sites as well. Another shortcoming for Windows 7 clients, if that Windows 7 client assigned to my Los Angeles entry point travels to the East Coast and they're in New York, they will still connect to the Los Angeles entry point because, again, that's the only entry point they are aware of. So they won't be able to intelligently select a entry point that's more geographically close to them. Windows 10, of course, has full support for DirectAccess multi-site. It is aware of all entry points, as I said, and supports transparent entry point failover. What that means is that in that scenario, for example, in my scenario where I have my DirectAccess client in Los Angeles and it's connected to the Los Angeles entry point, If for some reason that goes offline, then it will automatically fail over to the New York entry point, for example. Or and again, to match that other scenario that I'd mentioned, if I have a direct access client that happens to go to the East Coast, when that direct access client comes up, it will look at all the entry points, determine which one's the closest, and then it will automatically connect to the nearest one. In this case, if it's on the East Coast, then it would connect to the New York entry point. And if the New York entry point went down, since it's aware of all entry points, it will then select whichever site is closest to it that remains available online. So much better support for direct access multi-site using Windows 10 clients as compared to Windows 7. We talked about improved performance. Of course, Windows 10 clients offer much improved performance in most deployment scenarios. So let me qualify that by stating that we're talking specifically about when a direct access client uses the HTTPS IPv6 transition protocol. So for those of you who may not be aware of this, so IP HTTPS, well, let me back up. Direct access from a client perspective is IPv6 only. So when the client and or the server are on the IPv4 internet, we need a mechanism with which to get our IPv6 packets over the IPv4 internet, and for that we use IPv6 transition protocols. The protocols that are available to us are 64, Teredo, and IP over HTTPS. Now, IP HTTPS is used exclusively when you're deploying direct access behind an edge security solution, which is the recommended deployment. For the best security, overall security of the solution, that's the recommended deployment. Now, the challenge with IP HTTPS is that it leverages SSL and TLS for this traffic. So we're taking IPsec encrypted traffic, and then we're encrypting it again using SSL and TLS. So for Windows 7 clients, of course, Windows 7 clients don't offer any support for null encryption cipher suite, so they use encryption for that SSL TLS tunnel. It's not really necessary because when we're double encrypting here, it introduces a very high protocol overhead. And by the way, if you're using forced tunneling and your users are, you're forcing all your users' internet traffic back over the direct access tunnel, those users that are visiting secure websites, which are the majority of websites today, will then essentially be triple encrypting. So they're going to be encrypting the website, which is tunneled over an IPsec tunnel, which is encrypted, and then if it's using Windows 7, it will, and IP HTTPS, it will then encrypt it once again. So you can see that that's not a really scalable solution. So we're double encrypting, sometimes triple encrypting traffic for no real advantage or no real gain. Windows 10, however, does provide support for null encrypted cipher suites, which reduce this protocol overhead. Fundamentally, what happens here is we're just leveraging the HTTP protocol in order to encapsulate our traffic and tunnel it over the internet, but we don't necessarily need the SSL encryption. We don't need the SSL or the TLS encryption because the traffic, the payload in this case, is already encrypted with IPsec. So encrypting it again doesn't really serve any purpose. So in that case, it does, Windows 10 clients do support similar performance or performance that's on par with Teredo versus Windows 7 clients. So from that perspective, of course, Windows 10 offers much better performance. By the way, IP HTTPS, again, the standard protocol when you're using, or the only available protocol when you're using direct access behind a NAT. But even if you're edge facing and you can still support 64 and Teredo, many clients are still going to fall back to IP HTTPS anyway. So in terms of that, it's significantly better in terms of performance and scalability using Windows 10 clients for direct access. So let's talk a little bit about the client side and the connectivity status indicator. Now, one of the challenges with direct access and Windows 7 is that with Windows 7, direct access seemed to be a bit of an afterthought. Direct access was fully supported in Windows 7, but the challenge is that if you provisioned a direct access or a Windows 7 client for direct access, once it was provisioned, there wasn't any sort of visual indicator that stated you were provisioned, one, two, that you'd actually established a connectivity, a direct access connectivity, or three, any sort of interface with which to verify this or gather diagnostic information. That was all lacking. So Microsoft introduced something called the Direct Access Connectivity Assistant, or DCA, which was an optional component that had to be installed separately. So in other words, you had to deploy this software. It was a Microsoft software component. You download it from Microsoft, but you had to install it separately. And the challenge is that it had to be basically managed separately from the default management tool. So for example, you most as part of the Windows desktop. You can do that using PowerShell as well. When you deployed the Direct Access Connectivity Assistant for Windows 7, you have to manually create your own custom group policy objects to manage that. And not only that, if you've made changes in the management console, those may potentially impact the settings on the DCA, which you would have to actually now go back out and manually edit. So there was a lot of challenges around the DCA. It was a decent component, but fundamentally it was a little bit clunky and somewhat unintuitive. Windows 10, of course, features a connectivity status indicator that is baked into the operating system now, and it provides a nice, very clean, modern, intuitive visual cue that you actually have established a direct access connection, and if you have not, it will indicate perhaps why that is, or you can actually go and generate logs using the native GUI. Also includes enhanced support for one-time password or OTP authentication. So that makes Windows 10, again, a much better solution from purely from a supportability perspective. It's much easier to support and manage. Your administrators are going to absolutely love you. If you have Windows 7 clients today, when you get to Windows 10, it's just going to make that supportability much easier for your help desk folks. From a troubleshooting perspective, and again, this is a big win for your help desk engineers, much easier to troubleshoot direct access connectivity issues, configuration and connectivity issues in Windows 10, infinitely easier. So with Windows 7, of course, as I mentioned before, direct access is somewhat of an afterthought. So there were some real challenges there. Basically, the only tools you had available to you, at least from the command line perspective, were NetSH, and of course the DCA was the only thing that you could use for diagnostic log creation, and making things more difficult is there was no native PowerShell support for direct access configuration, verification, or troubleshooting, or anything like that. Contrast that with Windows 10, of course, and we have full native PowerShell support. There are some fabulous and tremendously helpful native PowerShell commandlets that are available to you to troubleshoot and verify not only configuration but connectivity, and make some determinations from that as well. The status indicator is just baked into the operating system now. It's a part of the GUI. I'm going to actually demonstrate how it's a little bit different in Windows 10 than it was in Windows 8 as well, so I'll show you that in just a minute. And then finally, again, commandlets for configuration and connectivity. There are some native built-in tools that will allow you to make that much easier. Let's take a quick look at what this looks like in action. I want to basically demonstrate a few of these tools that I've been talking about. So this is a Windows 10 client. This is, if we take a look, is a direct access client. It's been provisioned for direct access, and it is remote. So for example, you'll see that my network connection has a public IPv4 address. It also has an IP HTTPS interface with a global IPv6 address assigned to it. So here I actually have direct access, and I should be able to ping my application server, ping my domain controller, and so forth. And you'll see, of course, that those are responding with IPv6 addresses. So everything looks good there. As a matter of fact, if I go to, well, let's go to a shortcut here. This is my on-premises application server, and again, you'll see I've reached this application server using its single label host name, so I didn't have to access that any differently than I would have if I was inside the office. A shortcut to my home drive. I have the ability to access files and so forth natively over that tool. Didn't have to do anything to connect. That's kind of the beauty of direct access, of course. But in terms of a troubleshooting capabilities, one of the first things that a lot of help desk administrators struggle with is how do I quickly verify that a direct access client has actually been provisioned for direct access. How do I know it's actually received the settings? And there's a variety of ways to do it in Windows 7. In Windows 10, it is infinitely easier. There's actually a PowerShell commandlet. So it's get DA client experience configuration. If you run this command, the first thing you will find is that it has been populated with two important things. First is the IPsec tunnel endpoints, and the second is our corporate resources. Many of these other settings are actually found if the direct access client is not provisioned, but if it's not provisioned, you will not have IPsec tunnel endpoints defined. So just keep in mind that if you see something here, you have a high degree of confidence that this direct access client has been provisioned successfully. The second one is, okay, so I've taken my direct access client outside. How do I know that I have connection status and not? How do I know that I have a direct access connection, but I just can't connect to an application resource for some other reason? Maybe there's a name resolution issue. Maybe it's just the application server is not online. Maybe there's an application issue on the back end. How can I determine quickly if my client actually has connected successfully? And that's easy. There's another PowerShell command for that, and that's get DA connection status. Basically tells you very, very quickly, I've been connected remotely, and so forth. If it has not successfully connected, it will often tell you why. It will give you an error, and it will give you an error message, which is of course helpful for searching on the internets for help as to why that's happening. Another challenge that administrators face is I may have a connectivity issue when I'm on the corporate network, and I need to determine which network location server is this direct access client configured to use, and that was prohibitively difficult in Windows 7. In Windows 10, of course, it is quite simple. Another PowerShell commandlet, and this is get NCSI policy configuration, and this will give you some important information. And this will give you things like the corporate DNS probe host, our the DNS probe host name. Also, extremely important here is the web probe host URL. So this is extremely important because if this is not resolvable and reachable, I may have a direct access connection, but the status indicator will show connecting, and so that's a common issue. And again, as I'd mentioned, if I need to determine what the NLS URL is because perhaps I've made some changes or so forth, that information is available to me here. So that's tremendously helpful as well. And then if you want to look at the graphical user interface for direct access in Windows 10, it's a little bit different because the charms bar is gone. The charms bar is no longer. So if you hit Window key I in Windows 10 and select Network and Internet, you will see if the client has been provisioned for direct access, you'll see a direct access tab. Here it's going to give you some information. So for example, right off the bat, I have a connection. It says workplace connection. This is user definable or administrator definable in the remote access management console, but more importantly, it indicates that I have a connection status of connected. So instantly I know that I'm connected here. If this was a direct access multi-point or a multi-site deployment and I had multiple entry points, again, one in Los Angeles, one in New York, one in London, this would tell me, the information would be here as to which site my direct access client has connected to. So if I was in Los Angeles and it connected to LA, it would tell me, but it might tell me that I've connected to something else. That's helpful to know from a help desk perspective if perhaps the client thinks that a site is offline. The detection algorithm for multi-site connectivity is not entirely perfect. So there are times when you might be in Los Angeles and it picks New York because it thinks it's closer. So this information is certainly going to be tremendously helpful. Also, if your administrators have allowed users to select their own entry point, and certainly that's beneficial for troubleshooting, just to make sure all entry points are working, that would be selectable here. There'd be a drop-down list for that. And then finally, our troubleshooting information. So if I'm having connectivity issues and I want to connect the troubleshooting logs here, I can do that. Just click collect, and it will generate some detailed log files that I can take for offline analysis and determine perhaps why this client isn't connecting. So Let's talk a little bit about infrastructure for DirectAccess. One of the things I'd mentioned at the outset was that Windows 10 does enable a scenario in which you can reduce your infrastructure requirements. But first, let's talk a little bit about Windows 7. For Windows 7, of course, you must have a public key infrastructure. Certificates are required for authentication in Windows 7. They are optional in Windows 10, so it doesn't necessarily mean you have to deploy a PKI to support Windows 10. Unfortunately, regardless of which clients you deploy, Windows 7, Windows 8, Windows 10, you still have to have a PKI for a number of different deployment scenarios and features if you want to take advantage of them. For example, you have to have a PKI if you're going to support OTP. So one-time password, regardless, if you're going to do that with Windows 7 or 10, you must have PKI. If you want to support NAP integration, you must have a PKI. Same is true for load balancing and multi-site. So although Windows 10 does allow you to reduce, and force tunneling as well, although Windows 10 does allow you to potentially deploy DirectAccess without a PKI, it's still recommended in terms of providing the best security and the most flexible deployment. So if you deploy it without a PKI and later you need any of these features, and probably the most common are the load balancing and the multi-site, those still require that you use certificates for authentication, so you're still going to need a PKI. So just a word of caution, although it is potentially possible in some limited deployments you can get away without a PKI, it's definitely recommended that you do that. So let's talk a little bit about the E-Series, the Celestics Edge E-Series appliance. Now, the Celestics Edge E-Series is a solution that's built on Windows Server 2012 R2. It is a dedicated, purpose-built appliance platform that features a certified configuration with predictable performance. Your best chance of success in terms of performance are going to be deploying this on our dedicated hardware appliance platform. We have a number of different models of E-Series, the 3400, which is our kind of low-end small office device. We have this mid-range device at the 6400. It includes more CPU and memory and supports many more users. And then, of course, for large-scale enterprise deployments supporting many thousands of users, we recommend the 8400 series appliance because it supports the most amount of concurrent users. It includes much more computing resources as well. The E-Series comes with a number of capabilities. First and foremost is the web-based management console, which was recently redeveloped or rewritten entirely in HTML5, meaning that you can use any platform in any browser to manage the device. You can actually manage it from anywhere using any web browser. Really easy to install and configure, not only roles and features, but it also includes post-installation wizards that help you not only install DirectAccess, but also to implement it as well. It has a very compelling remote access dashboard that provides an instant high-level overview of who's connected to the session, the DirectAccess appliance. And not only that, includes the ability to proactively terminate DirectAccess connections, which is a proprietary feature not available outside of the Celestics platform. Also, the Celestics Virtual Edition is pretty compelling as well. For those of you who don't want to deploy a hardware-based solution, we do offer virtual appliances. So the Celestics VE series is available as a software installer. It's designed to be deployed on your existing virtual machine, so all you need to do is prepare a virtual machine and install our software on it. And it's available for new and existing deployments, so if you've already deployed DirectAccess and you want to take advantage of some of the proprietary features of the Celestics platform, you can do so. And all you have to do is basically install our appliance software on your existing virtual DirectAccess servers. And of course, the benefits of doing that means that you get to leverage these appliance features, but you get to do so in your virtual environment and take advantage of things like Celestics support. And ultimately, you gain the ability, or you gain the flexibility and scalability that comes along with deploying these solutions in a virtual environment. Things like snapshots, live migration, those types of things that are available to you for this workload. The Celestics appliance has a number of pretty compelling features and capabilities. that would take an entire webinar to demonstrate those, and I've actually done that in the past anyway. So if you'd like to see those, I would encourage you to visit celestics.com/video. Take a look at those and have a look at it. You can see the common web user interface in action. You can see some of the other capabilities as well. Definitely visit celestics.com/video and check it out. So that brings us to the end of the webinar. What I want to do is ask if anybody has any questions. There's a questions box there as part of the GoToWebinar software. If you have a question, just enter it in there, and I'd be happy to answer that for you. I do see that we have a couple of questions already. So the first question is, does DirectAccess work with Windows 10 Professional? Now, this is unfortunate answer to that is no. So this was somewhat wishful thinking, I think, certainly on my part, and probably perhaps many others, because when when Microsoft first introduced DirectAccess, it required the Enterprise or Ultimate version of Windows 7. When Windows 8 came out and Windows Server 2012 and 2012 R2 came out, of course, it still required the Enterprise SKU. There was no Ultimate SKU, but ultimately required the Enterprise SKU in Windows 8. Now, if, and many of us were kind of, again, wishful thinking here, but what we saw on the client operating system was that there was a number of features that were a part of Windows 7 Enterprise that were not available in Pro. And then when Windows 8 came out, those features were available in Pro, things like BitLocker, and there were some other things that were capabilities that were only for Enterprise that got pushed back into Pro. And there was a lot of I think, hope that perhaps Microsoft would have done the same thing with Windows 10 Professional by pushing DirectAccess support into Windows 10 Pro. Sadly, that is not the case. Maybe it's in the next version. Maybe it'll come out in the future. I don't know. But as it stands today, Windows 10 Enterprise Edition is required for DirectAccess. Windows 8 Enterprise also works, and of course Windows 7 Enterprise or Ultimate Edition. Ultimately, you still have to have the Enterprise Edition. Pro is not supported, unfortunately. Next question. So this is very similar. Is it supported on the Surface tablet? So the answer is depends. So the answer quickly is no out of the box. So if you purchase a Surface tablet, Surface Pro 3 or Pro 4 that's coming out here pretty soon, the answer is no. It's because those ship with Windows 10 or Windows 8 Professional. They don't ship with Pro. So you would have to upgrade them to Windows 8 or 10 Enterprise Edition. Now the good news is I've done that on numerous occasions. My personal Surface Pro 3 has been upgraded to Windows 10 Enterprise, and I use it with DirectAccess to connect to my home lab and use that quite often. So it works fantastic. Surface Pro is a fantastic platform. So as long as you install the Enterprise Edition of the client SKU, then you're in good shape. Next question, can I deploy the Celestics Edge VE series in the cloud? Excellent question. So as the Celestics Edge VE series is a virtual appliance and fundamentally just a software installer, you can install it on your own physical servers or your own virtual servers. Now, you cannot install it, well actually you can install it on a virtual machine running in Azure, but in Microsoft Azure, the routing and remote access role is not supported in Azure. So that means you can't use it for DirectAccess, you can't use it for VPN. So although you could install our software, the workload itself is not supported in Azure. By way of reference, I've actually deployed DirectAccess in Azure, and it does work for a period of time. However, it will break. It's very brittle. There are some there's some vagaries of how the plumbing of Azure works that will break DirectAccess. Even though you can get it working for a period of time, it's not something you're going to be able to rely on. So it is, and it's interesting because the DirectAccess workload is supported in AWS. So if you wanted to do this in Azure, or excuse me, in Amazon Web Services, it is supported there. However, I have never done that. It looks prohibitively difficult to get DirectAccess running in AWS. There's a document for it that outlines how to do it. It is, oh gosh, it's 30 or 40 pages long. So it's a real challenge. Certainly you're welcome to do that. If you can get it working there, we'll support it in AWS as well. One last question we have here. Does Windows 10 support NAP integration for DirectAccess? So you must have been talking to some folks on the internet because there's been some rumbling about this. So NAP is, of course, Microsoft's Network Access Protection. Microsoft has deprecated NAP, so they have removed or will not be developing or including NAP in future releases of Windows Server, whatever, 2016 is the next release. So NAP will not be a feature. So they've formally deprecated that feature. They're removing it from the operating system. Windows 10, of course, is affected because Microsoft removed the plumbing for NAP from the client. What that means is that if you've deployed DirectAccess today and you are leveraging NAP, it works with Windows 7 clients, it works with Windows 8 clients. If you deploy Windows 10 clients into that environment, they will not work because they are lacking the infrastructure to support NAP integration. So in that case, if you wanted to support Windows 10 in a DirectAccess environment with NAP, you would have one of two choices. You will either have to disable NAP integration because NAP is a global configuration. You can't selectively apply it to certain clients. You would have to either disable NAP for the deployment or optionally deploy DirectAccess in parallel, so have two DirectAccess deployments, one supporting NAP integration for supported clients like Windows 7 and Windows 8, and another deployment with NAP disabled that would be for Windows 10 client support. All right, looks like we got to all of the questions. If there's anything else that comes up, what I would suggest is just drop a note to sales@celestics.com. They'll have somebody get back with you and answer your question, whether it's technical or commercial in nature. Just go ahead and drop it to sales@celestics.com. And then be sure to visit celestics.com/edge to learn more about our physical and virtual appliances. Lots of great information there, integration papers, and so forth. That kind of wraps things up. Thank you very much, everybody. I appreciate your time, and we'll talk again soon. Thank you.